Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover. We are going to go over all of the weekend action in the playoffs. We're going to go over the NBA playoffs with both the Celtics and the Mavericks going up 3-0 in their series. And then we are going to go over the NHL playoffs with 3 out of 5 games going to overtime. This has been some of the closest conference finals we have seen in a very, very long time. So we are going to go over that. And then the breaking news from last night is the reigning NL MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr., is out for the year with a torn ACL. We'll talk about how that's going to affect the Braves season and if they can recover from losing such an important piece. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave a comment or a donation at GSMCPodcast.net. I appreciate anything you do give. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch and talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to start off a Memorial Day holiday show talking a little bit about the action from over the weekend. The Celtics go up 3-0. They're up 3-0 in the series. It looked like they were going to lose. They were down 18 at one point to the short-handed Indiana Pacers, a Pacers team that going into that game hadn't lost a game at home in 11 games. They hadn't, it dates all the way back to the end of the regular season. They had won the last 11, including being perfect in the playoffs, and it looked like they were going to keep that trend up early in the first half. They were up by, I believe, 12 at half. Their lead was at most 18. The Celtics are able to come back mostly off of the strength of that second half. Like I said, they were just, and you could see the difference of what the Pacers are with and without Tyrese Halliburton. Closing has been the biggest issue for this team. The ability to close out a game, they really struggled with it. I mean, you take a look at just their point totals, not shooting or anything like that. They had 31-38 in the first and second quarters and 21 in both the third and the fourth quarter. Their shooting takes a huge hit. The Celtics just continue to play their brand of basketball, and especially in the fourth quarter, which is something that the Pacers really have been struggling in against the Celtics. You know, they lost the fourth quarter in every single one of these games. They did, except for the overtime game that they should have won it. But even then, it felt like they lost because the turnovers there at the end. But when you take a look at what this Pacers team is, they had a lot of people step up. You know, Andrew Nembhard had 32 points on relatively efficient shooting. Miles Turner had 22 points. Pascal Siakam had 22 points. The T.J. McConnell off the bench, who's been huge for them all playoffs long, he had 23 points. You had 4 players over 20 points, and they were still unable to get the job done. And it just comes down to not being able to close it out, not having that guy. And it's the same kind of issue that the Wolves are having, actually, where they don't have that guy to turn to at the end. And we'll talk about the Wolves in our second segment here. But continuing with the Pacers and the Celtics come out, they're down 12 at half, and they step on the gas pedal. The Pacers get comfortable. They, stop playing as aggressively as they were playing in the first half. And they let Tatum have a huge game. If Tatum is able to play like this, basically 50% efficiency, which isn't the greatest, but it's not bad. putting up 36 point triple double, 36, 10, and 8. Uh, it's tough, and this is also a team that is still without their starting center in Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis, a guy that, if he can play, is going to cause so many more problems for this team. Al Horford is good, and he put 23 points up in the last game. But if Al Horford was back on his bench role, which he's very, very solid at playing, and you let Kristaps Porzingis get his minutes, who I think Kristaps Porzingis might get a game in tonight. It doesn't seem like Tyrese Halliburton is, and that's really sucks, because this Pacers team, they just kind of ran out of gas. That's really what it turned. That's what it looked like here. The Pacers, they were up big, and then the Celtics overpowered them with talent. The Celtics didn't even play that many people last night, or a couple nights ago. Heading into the game, they obviously have the injury, but they play all of their starters at least 35 minutes. All of them get into double figures. All of them play pretty good games. Derek White didn't have his greatest game, but, it's not... He had 4 blocks, which is... He helps out on the defensive end. Al Horford really is the one that killed them, especially in that second half there. There was a steal at the end of the game. The Pacers had a chance to, put the Celtics away with a bucket, and Drew Holiday picked the pocket, brought him down, gave him the lead. And then I saw something that I haven't seen in a very, very long time. We see really maybe ever. The Indiana Pacers are down 3 with 30 seconds to go, or with about 3 seconds to go, and they run a football play. They run a football play. They run what looks like Spider 2Y banana. It's crazy. They got an open shot, it worked, and he just missed the shot. They had the entire floor open for them, and it didn't work out. And that's the kind of luck that the Pacers have had all season, all playoffs long. I mean, you take a look at the Celtics run, and we'll talk more about the Celtics if and when they advance to the finals, but their run right now is littered with injuries, just like everybody else in the East. And people are going to dismiss this run saying, oh, it's way too easy, they didn't play anybody, and yeah. But we knew that heading in, didn't we? We knew heading into the playoffs that nobody could compete with the Celtics in the Eastern Conference. People were hyping up the Knicks, but then they got hurt, and the Knicks could have done it, maybe. They were the only team that might have had a shot, but the Celtics were head and shoulders above literally everybody else in the Eastern Conference this season, that it wasn't really up for debate who was most likely going to go to the finals. There were always the chance. The playoffs can lead to chaos, but the difference in skill between these two teams, the difference of where each of these teams were at the end of the regular season, there was a clear and obvious distinction. And we saw that really take hold in this game. Pacers are a very good home team, and I think if Halliburton can play, and he doesn't seem like he's on track to play right now tonight in Game 4, but if he can play, it can make a difference. They just need to be tighter at the end. They turn the ball over way too often. I mean, you look at the turnover numbers, 7-11, and then the big steal down the stretch. It's just it doesn't work that way. And the Pacers have done a great job keeping these games close. Game 2 wasn't that close, but they were still fighting through it for most of that game. Game 1 obviously goes to overtime, and Game 3 here is a 3-point game that had a chance to go to overtime if they can hit that buzzer-beating shot, or, maybe they have a chance to put the Celtics, to take a game from the Celtics if Drew Holiday doesn't come up with that steal down the stretch on that second to last possession for the Pacers. They were in this game, and all credit to the Pacers. They've done an incredible job keeping the Celtics close. But they just don't have enough. And they've been shooting really well as a team, too. 50%, 22% from three hurts, but a lot of that was in the second half. And as like I said, they kind of blew this game again. They've blown two of these games. They probably should have won this. I know the Celtics are good, but the Pacers shouldn't have blown an 18-point lead at home, especially when they've been so good at home, especially in the playoffs and towards the end of the season. But anyway, I expect the Celtics to probably take this game tonight, game 4 tonight, especially if Tyrese Halliburton can't suit up. He really wants to suit up, but that's hamstring. It's the kind of injury that just kind of lasts. And even if he comes in, he's not going to be 100%. And a not 100% Tyrese Halliburton is not going to be helpful against a team like the Celtics that likes to run the court so much. Both of these teams like to run the court, and which is why you need a healthy Tyrese Halliburton out there if he's out, if he's going to be out there. A hobbled Halliburton isn't going to help them too much. So I expect the Celtics to take this game. Let me know what you guys think of this series so far. Is it a surprise that the Celtics are on pace to sweep them? What do you think the Pacers need to do to change? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. But moving on to our next segment, we are going to talk a little bit about the other NBA series, the Mavericks and Timberwolves, which shockingly is also at a 3-0 series lead for the Dallas Mavericks. We'll talk about that series. We'll talk about Luka Doncic and what he has been doing to really make a case for the best player in the world right now. So we'll talk about that and more coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world, please Lord, give me a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I'll blow up in the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out show over 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced, I'll get my time. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the lose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live, but choose to dip. You choose to fight, or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. Everybody in the world, please don't give me a sign.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Celtics and the Pacers. How the Pacers almost sent it to overtime on a ridiculous-looking football-style play that worked out really well. They got that open shot, it just didn't go in. They blew a little bit of a lead down the stretch. They're now down 3-0 to a super dangerous Celtics team that still isn't even at full strength. They play tonight. We'll see if the Celtics sweep them. I think they probably will, especially without Tyrese Halliburton. That loss really hurts. But anyway, in this segment here, we are going to move into the other NBA series, this time talking about the Mavericks, also going up 3-0 on the Minnesota Timberwolves. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything you would like me to talk about, go ahead and leave a comment. Go ahead and leave a donation at GSMCPodcast.net. I appreciate everything you do give, appreciate you sticking around, talking some sports with me on a Memorial Day Monday. I hope you guys are enjoying your long weekend. But like I was saying, we're going to talk a little bit about the other NBA series here. The other 3-0 series, the Mavericks are up 3-0 on the Minnesota Timberwolves, the darling of the NBA playoffs, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team with the rising star in Anthony Edwards. And Anthony Edwards, we need to talk a little bit about him because he has not had a great series. Even going back to the end of that Denver series, he hasn't been very good. And we talked a little bit about how the Pacers are kind of flubbing without their star. The Timberwolves are in a very similar position, right? The Timberwolves there are sitting with their superstar, and he's just being really inefficient. He's making these mistakes that you expect a young guy to make in his first playoff run, but the pressure's been put on him. They've been put in as favorites. You know, they're supposed to win this series. They're now down 3-0 to possibly the best player in the world in Luka Doncic, who's definitely the best player left in the playoffs. But they're also letting Kyrie kill you. And you cannot let both of them kill you. They've scored 60 points, 50 points, and 60 points in the first 3 games, and that is not a recipe for success. The Timberwolves with their defense, should be able to shut down at least one of them. And I know it's a really tall task to sit there and say, hey, shut down Luka. But, you know, the Thunder were able to do it, and they don't have a Lou Dort on Minnesota. And Luka was able to figure that out eventually. But they were still able, the Thunder were still able to shut down Kyrie, basically. They weren't letting him go for 30 points a night. They weren't letting him go for 20 points a night. They were holding him down around 10 points a night. And that's something that the Timberwolves should be able to do. You know, this is not out of their ability to do something like that. They just haven't been able to play up to it. And they've made some awful end of games decisions. They haven't been able to close out games. Their shooting down the stretch has been awful. Naz Reid kept them in this game, in game 2 in Minnesota, shooting 7 of 9 from 3. It got to the point where, you know, in that situation, a game-winning situation, you know, Luka comes back and he hits a dagger step back 3 on Rudy Gobert, a mismatch, which that's another thing. You never want, if you're the Wolves, and everybody knew it, you don't want Luka Doncic on Rudy Gobert one-on-one. You know, that's not what you want to happen. That's not a recipe for success. Luka is going to cook him every time. Everyone on the floor knew it. The announcers knew it. They on the call, they said, oh, there's the switch. That's what the Mavericks were game planning for. They did a great job. They did it exactly how they were supposed to do it. But the Timberwolves kind of blew this game. They could have dribbled out the clock. They could have just had a nice shot, at least gotten free throws maybe. But instead, up 2, they throw the ball away. They just throw it out of bounds. Anthony Edwards, who continues to be inefficient from the field, you know, 5 of 17, 2 of 7 from 3. Naz Reid comes in, he keeps them alive in that game. He has 23 points to lead the team, 7 3-pointers, and he gets the ball in his hands at the last shot. You know, they try to get it into Anthony Edwards. He gets clamped. He gets it to Naz Reid, who has a great shot. And it just misses. It's a deep 3. It's not a shot that people are coming down on him, expecting him to make. But they had a shot to win it, and it didn't work. You know, nobody on that offense was efficient. Karl Anthony Towns continues to put up stinker after stinker. He shot 4 of 16 in game 2. It's just, they need to shoot better. Hands down. You're not going to win a series against Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, you know, combining for when they score 50 and 60 points, when your team can't shoot higher than 40%. It's not how it's going to work. And the Timberwolves, I know, rely a lot more on defense than any other team, right? But the Mavericks just have been a much better team, and that comes to my surprise. I know I picked the Timberwolves to win this game. I had them winning this in 7 at the beginning of this series. But I mean, the Mavericks, they've just been awesome to watch. They really have been. There hasn't been a team that's been able to stop Luka, and I don't think there will be. Luka is just that special of a talent, and he's making his case to be the best player in the world. You know, it had been Jokic undisputed. He's definitely moved up into number 2, and he's taken a lot of the luster away from a guy like Anthony Edwards, a guy who kind of was the rising star in this playoff, still is. His star is still rising, but he's put up a lot of bad games in a row, and he needs to be able to, take a step back and be more efficient again. I feel like all the media attention kind of got to him, and he's trying to do more than he should. And I don't blame him. It's not easy to be a player, get compared to Michael Jordan all of a sudden, and then, turn around and be that guy, be able to meet those expectations. It's not easy to do by any stretch of the imagination. Nobody expects, or people were putting a lot of expectations on Anthony Edwards, and I feel like he's trying to meet them. He really is. And I feel like he's just trying a little much. He's getting himself out of his game. He's trying to make those extra plays that just aren't usually for him, going up for crazy highlights, extra dunks that, don't fit the way that he usually plays. The Timberwolves, as much as hard as it is to come back from 3-0, they're the team that could do it. They need to if they can figure out how to shut down Kyrie Irving, at least at a minimum. If they can hold Luka and Kyrie combined to under 30 points, they can win any of these games. And that is really hard to do because Luka clearly, on his own, can put up 30 points, more than 30 points per game. I think he's done that in every single game this series, and he's been awesome. It's been so much fun to watch Luka go to work, and he's probably going to go to the finals. I'm so excited to see him in the finals. There's lots of storylines there with him, not with him, but with the Mavericks and the Celtics. Like I said, it's a changing of the guard, and it's very exciting to see this new era of the NBA really start to take form. Luka Doncic is so good. He's maybe the best pure scorer in the sport right now, and he's not just a pure scorer. You take a look, he's almost averaged a triple-double in the regular season. It was almost a 30-point triple-double average in the regular season, which is insane, unheard of. And you look at his playoff numbers are even better. He's just straight up unstoppable. And that's sometimes just how it goes. The Wolves ran into a buzzsaw, and the Mavericks are not going to be stopped easy. The Wolves just are faster as a team, and with Rudy Gobert down there, the Mavs are faster as a team. With Rudy Gobert down there, center, he can't recover. They've been drawing him up to the top of the key and killing them with lobs. And then obviously you see on those super important possessions, they switch Rudy Gobert onto a mismatch, which the Nuggets were trying to do, but they weren't able to do it as successfully as the Mavericks have, running that pick and roll with Rudy Gobert up top. TJ asks a question: if Luka wins Final MVP, would you consider him the best player in the league? I don't think I would consider him the best player in the league. I think Jokic still has that crown. Winning 3 MVPs in the last 4 seasons is it's hard to top. Luka's close. I think he's number 2 right now. Obviously, 5 straight first team All NBAs is a feat that almost no one has ever done. But he's still got a little bit, and I think what Jokic can do as a passer and a big, and how easy he makes it look. And I know that's nothing that you can't say about Luka, right? But I just think the size itself kind of gives Jokic a bit of an advantage, and I don't think it'll be too long before you can start to consider it. Maybe if he wins Finals MVP, you can start to consider it, but I don't think he would be yet. I think I need to see him kind of outclass him a little more, because that's the kind of thing that's just tough to switch off like that. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to move into some breaking news in baseball. Ronald Acuna Jr., the reigning NL MVP, is out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL. We'll take a look at how that's going to affect the Braves season, what that looks like for the rest of the NL, as they were one of the top competitors along with the Phillies and the Braves. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the 3-0 series lead that Luka and the Mavericks have over the Minnesota Timberwolves. In the first segment, we talked about the Celtics building their own 3-0 series lead over the Indiana Pacers that are now without Tyrese Halliburton. Potential finals matchup. We'll talk more about that matchup when and if it does end up coming into fruition. In this segment here, we're going to move out of basketball, talk a little bit about some baseball. There was some major breaking news last night, unfortunate breaking news, as Ronald Acuna Jr., the reigning NL MVP, star right fielder for the Atlanta Braves, is out for the season with a torn ACL. So we're going to talk all about how that will affect the Braves and everybody else in the NL for that matter, coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Leave it as a donation at gsmcpodcast.net. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a holiday, Memorial Day Monday. But like I was saying, we're going to get right into some baseball. Breaking news. Some of the biggest news out of the MLB in quite some time. Obviously, we had Paul Skeens come up, but the Braves continue to get hit with injuries. They lost their best pitcher in Spencer Strider, a guy who I consider to be a top 3 pitcher in the league, who could make an argument as one of the best pitchers in the league. They now lose Ronald Acuna Jr. So they have lost arguably their top 2 players. And for anybody else, other than maybe the Dodgers, you take a look at this loss of Acuna, and you say, oh, our best player is gone. Our reigning MVP is gone. Our season's down the drain. But the Braves are in a very unique position here, right? And I don't want to minimize the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr. here. Like I said, he's a reigning NL MVP. They've lost 2 of their best players. And they were already kind of struggling with the bats, and losing a guy who, to be fair, was struggling with bats at the beginning of the season, but usually teams start slow in May, bats come up around June, and we were starting to see that come up for the Braves. Not only is it a blow for them skill-wise in their lineup, defensively, everything, he's a leader. It's a blow mentally and morally. It especially in baseball, that's one of those things that sucks the most. Baseball is a long, grueling season, and as much as it is a physical sport where you have to be able to make those pitches, your arm has to last, you have to be able to hit the ball, you have to be able to make the plays, you have to be able to enjoy going to that clubhouse. And losing a guy like Ronald Acuna is going to devastate a locker room. And the Braves are good enough. The cure for anything in sports is winning. The Braves are good enough that they can survive this, which is an insane thing to say. Right, the Braves, any other team loses their best player, and it's disastrous. And this is still disastrous. It sucks for the Braves. It sucks for the sport of baseball as a whole, not being able to see a player like Acuna go out and play every single day. And this is his second time that he's been out, had gotten a season-ending leg injury. He got, I believe it was Achilles injury 2 years ago that held him out of the World Series. they ended up winning the World Series that year. So maybe this is exactly what the Braves need. But the Braves are a very good team. They have been struggling. Like I said, the Phillies have just come out and they've built a pretty solid lead on the division. I believe they're 6 games up on the Braves right now. The Braves don't have anybody to replace Ronald Acuna Jr. right now. You could throw Jared Kelenic in there. He sucks against lefties. Straight up. He can't hit lefties. He was a project, and you can throw him out there for now. It's not the end of the world, but they need to go find someone, and the trade deadline still hasn't passed. They've got a month or two to go and make a trade for an outfielder, but you're not going to get there's not going to be one guy out there that's going to, be able to replace the production of MVP caliber player in Ronald Acuna Jr. Excuse me. You can do what they did in 2021 when they won the World Series. You go get 3 guys. You go get an Eddie Rosario. You go get a Jorge Soler. You go get Adam Duvall. They did a little platoon there to replace him, and it worked out. That's the kind of thing they're going to have to do. And the Braves have been very good at making trades in the past. There's plenty of outfielders out there for them to get. A lot of them are in division. De La Cruz from Miami. You can get Winker from Washington. There's plenty of like mid-tier, high upside MLB trade candidates that can fit in at a position, especially in the outfield. They come a dime a dozen. So it's definitely something that's worth it's not worth giving up on this season. You're not too far out of the race. I don't expect them to win the division now. They were in kind of a dogfight with the Phillies, who have come out at a whole nother level with their pitching staff, especially, and their bats are also still coming online. Like I said, it doesn't really start to heat up when the balls start flying in June with the warmer weather. But they're still getting ready. They're still getting better. And I still think the Braves are a playoff team. They are lucky that they have the second deepest roster in the MLB. Aside from the Dodgers, there's no other team that could survive a blow like this. You still have Matt Olson. You still have Austin Riley. You still have Orlando Arcia. You still have all these all-star level players. Matt Olson, who was top of the league in MVP voting last year as well. And your pitching staff still has Chris Sale, who's back to old-time Chris Sale, which... Of course they are. It went back to Atlanta. It's going to work out. But they also have, the rest of that pitching staff is nothing to scoff at either. They have a wealth of they have too many riches. It's overflowing, and they will be okay. Ronald Acuna Jr. with that loss, I don't think they're going to be World Series contenders anymore. They were my World Series pick heading into it, just because I didn't think the Dodgers were going to gel quickly, but the Dodgers are playing like nobody's business, and the Phillies, like I said, they've taken that next step. It's a next step I didn't think the Phillies even had, but they've taken that next step, and I think losing Acuna definitely knocks them out of, top tier contention in the MLB for a World Series kind of situation. But their team is still good enough that I can see them making a deep playoff run. Coming as a top wild card, they'll get whatever bottom scraps come out of that last wild card. It's not going to be great in the NL, but they come out here. They can make a bit of a run. They can make some noise, and a team with nothing to lose, with no expectations. This Braves season seemingly has just lost all expectations. They're already down 6-0 today to the Washington Nationals, a team that is not very good. But they're losing to this team, and you can see, like I said, the clubhouse, it's not looking good. Like the mentality of the guys in the clubhouse, they're still recovering from this, and it's a long season, and they need to recover from that before they can turn this around and start winning again, because that is the most important part of baseball. That's why there are scrappy teams that suck, that make deep runs in the playoffs, because they have fun, they're enjoying their time, and having fun, believe it or not, is one of the biggest factors at being good at baseball. Because baseball, if you're not having fun, is a slog. But yeah, The Braves, this is a huge setback, and it sucks for Ronald Acuna Jr., and I wish him a quick and speedy recovery. But the Braves should still be a playoff team. I do need to see their bats start to get going soon. And if I don't by the end of June, there's many more concerns that I have with them. But their pitching staff is still great. That roster construction is still one of the best in the whole league. And they can and definitely will go and find replacements at the trade market. So we'll see what happens. The Braves are still a very good team. We're going to transition into the ice, talk about the two series that are going on in the NHL. One is tied 1-1, the other is up 2-1. There have been 3 overtime games in 5 games in the conference finals. So some of the closest conference final action for both of these series that we've seen in a very long time. We'll break down all of the drama that's been going on in the Rangers and Florida Panthers series happening next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the loss of Ronald Acuna, the reigning NL MVP for the Atlanta Braves, and what that projects their outlook, how that changes for the rest of the season for the Atlanta Braves. In this segment, we're going to move out of the baseball breaking news onto hockey. There are 2 incredible series going on right now between the Rangers and the Panthers and the Stars and the Oilers. We're going to talk about some of the overtime games that have been going on. Like I said at the end of the last segment, 3 of the 5 games in the conference finals have gone to overtime, including 2 in a row in the Rangers and Florida Panthers series. So we will talk about all that in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and leave it in a comment. Go ahead and leave it in a donation at GSMCPodcast.net. I appreciate all of you for sticking around, talking some sports with me on a Memorial Day Monday, and yeah, let's just get right into it. Like I was saying, we're going to switch into the hockey side of the playoffs here. There's always 2 sides to the coin here in the NBA, NHL playoffs. We are moving on to the NHL here. We're going to talk about the back-to-back overtime games that the Rangers have taken. First one, 2-1, a goalie fest. My favorite brand of hockey to watch. You have 2 goalies standing on their heads. Igor Shesterkin has been the greatest goalie in the playoffs. Sergei Bobrovsky, no shit on him. He's played awesome as well, made some incredible saves. But Igor Shesterkin, throughout the entire playoff run, aside from in the first round versus the Capitals, where the Rangers just outmatched them. The Capitals there should have only been 7 teams from the East that made the playoffs. The Capitals backed their way in. Nobody wanted that final wild card spot, and the Caps just slid their way in there, right? They took that series pretty easily. But then you go to these next series, right? And in that 6-game series against the Carolina Hurricanes, I never thought they were the best team. And I know I was talking to Garrison and TJ about this on Garrison's show last Friday. Garrison felt a different way, but that's just what I saw when I was watching it. That the Rangers just aren't the better team. They have the better goaltender, but they're not the better team. And I'm getting the same feeling here in the conference finals against the Florida Panthers. Igor Shesterkin is so good that it doesn't matter that the Rangers are the worst team still remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And being the worst team of the Final Four, it isn't a bad thing, right? When you're going up against a team as deep as the Dallas Stars, or a team with the offensive firepower like the Edmonton Oilers, or your opponent being so physical and so great offensively and having a great goalie as well in the Florida Panthers, the Rangers, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be the worst of those four teams, because all four of these teams are amazing, right? They got here for a reason. They got here because they are quite possibly and most likely the best four teams in hockey. You could make the argument for a couple other teams, but these are probably the best four teams in the league this year. This isn't a bad thing for the Rangers. Like I said, they've won. They found a way to win somehow. And it's kind of baffling to me, honestly. I'm watching this series and I'm watching them play, and they just don't play disciplined. They gave up 6 power play opportunities to the Florida Panthers, or maybe 7, I believe, actually. Their penalty kill has saved them. Igor Shesterkin has been awesome on the penalty kill, just like their defense. But they just don't know how to protect leads. They were up by 2. They gave up 2 really quickly in the third period, and overtime. Again, it all comes down to goalies, because goaltender. I when I was watching one of these games, the way that the announcers were explaining how draining a hockey game is, especially an overtime hockey game on all these players is he explains the first half of the game. It's you have a message, it's important. And you go play hard. The second half is you're running on fumes here. You've got nothing left in the tank. You're just that's when just the base skill takes over, right? And then overtime, it's just drive, just pure drive. And the Rangers have that, like I haven't seen in a very long time. They have the willpower like nobody else. They're just not as good as these other teams, and they're showing that in the 5-on-5 games. When you watch them play against these other teams, at least when I watch them play, they just don't look cohesive, or they don't look together. But nonetheless, they're here. They're up 2-1 in the conference finals, 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup. The first time they've made it in forever. Henrik Lundqvist never got one, and that is insane to say for how great of a goalie he is. Igor Shesterkin is playing better than anybody else in the National Hockey League right now. If I were to do personal player power rankings, he's number 1 every single time, because he's on another level, and no one can consistently get a puck past him. I know he gave up 4 in the last game, but when it came down in the clutch, when it came down to what needed to get done, he becomes a brick wall in overtime. He shut down Sergei Bobrovsky in back-to-back overtime. Sergei Bobrovsky, who in the playoffs had won 11 straight overtime games, one shy of the record for overtime playoff games. He's now lost 2 in a row. And the Panthers, they play physical, they play fast, and the Rangers are matching that energy. They really are. Jacob Trouba, who is a little bit of a dirty player, in game 3 here, he elbows someone. He's probably going to get ejected or suspended for a game. He only had a minor on that, but if you go back and you watch it, he just elbows the Florida Panther player on a breakaway, stops a goal, gets into the penalty box. I expect him to get ejected. He has not been the cleanest player. He attempted to decapitate somebody on the ice with his head in the second round in overtime as well. So he plays aggressive, and he's there to get you, and he gets it done. But it's not in the way that you're supposed to do it. So I expect him to get suspended, and I think that's definitely going to hurt the Rangers. He is their captain, and again, the Rangers are an incredibly physical team. He kind of leads that physicality. He's a very physical player. So I'm curious to see if they can keep that energy up without him. Again, they're up 2-1. I don't expect a suspension to be more than one game, but I do expect him to get suspended. I'd be surprised if he didn't. He's a repeat offender. He's been suspended for dirty plays in the past. I believe twice in his career. So this is something that the NHL is definitely going to look at, consider, and they're going to give him a more extensive punishment than just if any Joe Schmo did that. But at the same time, it's the Rangers and it's the playoffs and it's the NHL that's very inconsistent with its passing out of punishment. So we'll have to see what happens. If I were Gary Bettman, I'd give him one game. That's not going to kill the series, but you can't just let that go unpunished. But anyway, back-to-back overtime wins. That's clutch play, and having a clutch gene is almost as important as having a great team. You have a goalie and a clutch gene, you can go far. And we saw that with the Panthers, honestly, last season. The Panthers were that team. They had the goalie, Sergei Bobrovsky. They had that clutch gene. Connor Verhaeghe, I believe, had like 5. He's up there in all-time overtime game winners, overtime playoff game winners, just because of last season and this season. He has one this season already, and he had multiple last playoff run. He had that clutch gene. The Panthers don't seem to have it this year, but the Rangers are playing with that underdog spirit, even though they are, the President's Trophy Cup winning team. They have the best record in the league, but they're playing like they were the 8th seed, and it's really paying off. It's a lot. It's exhausting on your players, especially if you keep doing these long series and these long overtime games. Like I said, 2 straight overtime games. That's 8 periods of hockey. It's not easy on these players' bodies. Hockey is an incredibly physical sport, and they've just done a great job of keeping that energy up. I'm curious if they can keep it up for the entirety of the series and into another series, because that's where it's really going to get tested. You play into June, and these players are taxed. But anyway, we're going to talk about the other side of the bracket coming up on our 5th and final segment here today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars being tied. They also had an overtime game where Edmonton and Connor McDavid, we talked about that one. Connor McDavid was able to give them a 1-0 series lead. The Stars answered back. Game 3 is tonight. We'll break down what I expect to see as the series shifts back to Edmonton. Coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the thrilling overtime games that have led the Rangers up 2-1 in the series against the Florida Panthers, how they've kind of backed their way into this position, in my opinion at least. In this segment, as we finish off our show here today, we are going to go to the other side of the NHL bracket, talk a little bit about the Stars and the Oilers. We're going to talk about their two games and what we're looking at as the series shifts back to Edmonton tonight. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. I appreciate all of you for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on holiday, on Memorial Day. I hope you're having a great Memorial Day weekend. But we're going to finish off our show here talking a little bit about the Stars and the Oilers. The Stars evened up the series over the weekend to 3-1 win to make it 1-1 in the series. The series heads back to Edmonton. And this is a very interesting series to me because it's kind of a battle of philosophies in a way that we haven't seen in a long time in the NHL. It's a battle of, can my offense be better than you? Than your defense, your goalie. And it's been a long time since an offense is good enough to consistently carry a team deep into the playoffs. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, as we've talked about, we looked at Game 1 and really even Game 5 and 6, or 6 and 7 against the Vancouver Canucks with the Edmonton Oilers. We talked about them and how their defense stepped up and how with their defense stepping up, they might be the best team in the league because that offense on its own, quite frankly, is good enough to take this team to a Stanley Cup final. This offense is Stanley Cup final alone, is good enough for a Stanley Cup final alone, and that's a really rare sentiment to have. They've been able to carry this team twice now in the last couple seasons to the Western Conference Finals, and they lost to Colorado Avalanche the first time, and this is now the second time. They're tied at 1. If their defense can play like they did in the first game of this series, they can beat anybody. And their defense didn't even play amazing. Their defense was just average. That's all it takes for their defense to be average. If their defense can be average, they can win the cup. And I want to see McDavid win a cup. He is the most deserving player in the world to win a cup. You talk about the current, the present, and the future of the NHL is Connor McDavid, a guy who is so skilled. It's so much fun to watch him. His combination of shooting, passing, playmaking, and speed is almost unmatched in the history of the NHL. He's that good. But he's just unfortunately been on a team that cannot develop goaltending, cannot develop defense, and they've poured a lot into the offense. It's a cup-winning offense. But now they go up against these 3 teams, whoever they would play in this series and the next series, they all have elite goalies. And they need to be able to deal with that. So, taking a look at the Oilers, what they need to do heading up into Edmonton, and I can boil it down to one sentence, obviously, play defense. But what I'd like to see them do more specifically is continue to be aggressive on the forecheck, right? They need to continue to pressure the puck up top, and especially at the top of the defensive zone. If you can force turnover up there, you get instant offense, especially with the speed of your team. You know, you can get those odd man breaks quite often, and that's how you beat these teams with aggressive defense. Now, it's not aggressiveness to the point where you're out of position. You have to be smart with your aggressiveness. You have to be you gotta be like a little pest. You can't be just charging at people and getting out of position, but you need to just be up in their face and causing issues. Clear the net. Don't let them screen the goalie. That's what they love to do. That's the Stars' bread and butter right there. And I know that's really every team's bread and butter. You know, you get a guy up there, get a shot on net, get a rebound. That's the easiest way to score. But you can't let the Stars do that, especially a team as deep as them. On the other end, for the Stars, their offense just needs to beat. They just need to get pucks on net. That's really what it comes down to. They kind of run, and really a lot of teams kind of run a perfectionist offense against the Oilers because they don't have a great defense. They they hold the puck too long. They wait for that best shot. Shoot for a rebound. Get people to the front of the net. That's how you made it to overtime in the first game. Sagan just cleaned up rebounds. In this second game, you cleaned up the rebounds. You got empty net goals. They just did a great job getting pucks to the net, and that's really what you need to do. And they didn't do it in the first period, and they kind of struggled because of that. But get pucks to the front of the net. That's the key for the Stars. Just shoot it. It doesn't matter if it's a bad shot. If you can get it to the net, a scrum will happen, and with the way that the Edmonton defense is, regardless of how it's been recently, they're not good enough. The Edmonton defense on its own isn't good enough to consistently make those plays. And Skinner in goal, or whether it be Skinner or Pickard, they're not going to be able to make those insane plays, those stick saves, covering an entire side of the net with just your stick, like Ottinger can do, like Shesterkin can do, like Bobrovsky can do. You just need to get pressure on these goalies, and they will crack. But yeah, it's going to be a fun series. This is the closest group of conference finalists that the NHL has seen in quite a long time. So I'm very, very excited. We're getting past dynasties. All of these sports, all sports now, the NBA and the NHL are, getting back to parity, and it's awesome to see. But yeah, tonight we have the Stars taking on the Oilers, and we have the Celtics looking to close out the series in Indiana against the Pacers. I think prediction for the hockey game, I think the Stars, again, I just don't believe in this defense. I think the Stars will be able to take care of business. This feels like an overtime game, maybe like a 3-2 Stars victory in overtime. And then in basketball, I think the Celtics will win by 15 or so. We'll have to see what happens with we'll have to see what happens with Halliburton. He's unlikely to play. But if he does suit up, I think they can take it at home. The Pacers are 11-1 in their last 12 home games. So again, that home court advantage has been huge for them. But yeah. Let me know what you think of anything we talked about here today in our show. Leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow, talking about all the action from tonight and any other major breaking news from around the world of sports. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and tuning in to a special Memorial Day episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I will see you tomorrow. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to my point of feel like it's